Welcome everybody to today's webinar. Thank you for joining us at lunchtime. Hope you've got a nice coffee or a sandwich or something to enjoy whilst we're chatting to you today. Delighted to be here and to be joined by Craig Campbell. And today we're going to be talking about a really important topic, which is all about how to increase your close rate for members, and principally with January in mind, but we can make some immediate impacts as well based on what we're going to talk to you about today. So it's all about doing something that's very quick, very easy, free to implement. There's no cost to implement any of this stuff that we're going to teach you today, and it should make an immediate impact. You want to flick on, Craig? So let's talk about why we're here and what we're going to cover. So this image is obviously showing a gym which is perhaps not as busy as we'd like it to be, and certainly not as busy as gyms were back in the day. And the key point, I suppose, is that you've got some interesting challenges at the moment and some difficult challenges to overcome. And really what we're trying to do is get back as quickly as we can to having a bustling, full, profitable facility again. And so today we're gonna talk about kind of some of the drivers for that being in that position, and then explore a solution about what we can do to try and help with that. Anything to add there, Craig? Or if not, flick on.
There we go. Oof.
Let these people in. Oops. So just quickly a bit about us. Just to give you an idea that we've got some expertise here. Do you want to start, Craig? Give a bit of background on yourself and your expertise and what you've done in the industry.
Yeah, okay. So my career has basically been about just under 30 years, 29 years, I think it is, in operations. So I started off before I started coming into leisure, I started working for McDonald's. Crazy job, but still the best organization I've ever worked for in terms of systems and process. I then had the pleasure of going to work for De Vere. I moved up the ranks through fitness first. Then I was the national management trainer for LA Fitness. I spent 6 years as a commercial analyst looking at people's data in the private and trust sector. That's why I look after now about 125 different councils and trusts. And for the last 5 years or so, I've been working for myself, which is why we're going to try and do this little bit of an educational session for you today. Again, I think the key that's going to come out of what me and Christian are doing today is we're not trying to pitch to you, we're not trying to sell to you, we're just trying to give you some tips to try and make sure January goes off with a bit of a bang.
Yeah, so, and Craig's very modest, but probably what many people know Craig for is he did a really popular series of webinars that were super helpful when the pandemic started, and you had hundreds and hundreds of organizations on, and I think everybody in the industry was really thankful for that.
Yeah, we had about 590 different organizations that came on, and I think I ended up doing about 18 weeks worth of all the COVID presentations, trying to interpret the government stuff. But yeah, it's just another thing we did, and it's all good.
All good. And as for me, I've been working in this kind of field supporting the leisure sector for about 12 years, and I really focus on two sides of two aspects. One is about safety, so reducing the risk of slips, trips and falls, which typically is the biggest cause of accident, injury and claim. And the other side of what I do is help people with cleanliness, so particularly on sort of barefoot and wet area, hard surfaces like floors and shower walls and things like that, getting those up back to being sort of as good as new aesthetically, which obviously has a benefit. And I've worked for a range of clients from very high-end health clubs, standalone health clubs, all the way through to schools and local authorities and trusts and private operators and kind of everything in between. So this week, for example, we've done a deep clean for Walsall Council. We've done a job in a Marriott hotel. We're doing something for Fusion later in the week, and I think we're doing something for Parkwood as well. So certainly get around. So that's enough about us anyway, Craig.
Yeah, that's enough. That's enough.
Yeah.
What are the issues? Why are we here?
So I think there's a few things going on clearly, which everybody will be aware of. We've got members having, because of COVID, very much heightened perceptions around cleanliness. And although we've seen some good data from people that have come back that are pretty happy with what's happening, obviously there's a big gap between the people that have come back and the people that haven't come back, and there's an even bigger gap between the members that are there now and the potential members that we could have in an ideal world. So thinking about perceptions and what we can do to meet those, I suppose. The other challenge we've got is obviously around staff levels. So everybody that I speak to is struggling to recruit people at the moment and struggling to retain staff as well. If you've got fewer staff, you've obviously got a challenge and a need to do more for less. We've got higher costs as well. So, national insurance, minimum wage, and all these other things going up. And then coupled with that, so that's the sort of supply side of things from your perspective. And on the demand side, we've obviously got things going on in the economy, people's incomes sort of falling in real terms. And therefore, I was chatting to a trust MD the other week, and he told me he'd given up his David Lloyd membership because he's just got to be watching the pennies. So if he's having to do that, other people are as well. So basically, we've got all that going on. We've got to try and plug this gap that we talked about and get membership numbers back ASAP. So that's the kind of situation that we're in. Anything to add to that, Craig?
No, I think the bits that are going to really stand out is that heightened perception of customers. We're in an industry where we weren't particularly well known for our sort of cleanliness. Now, obviously, when we reopened, I think everyone will have been good, and I think has that slipped because of the staff, because of the cost, because of all these different things? Are we as good as when we first reopened? And we're probably not. We'll show you a couple of examples of that as we go throughout today. But I think that's one of the biggest problems we have, is this heightened perception of what their expectation is, especially those that haven't come back yet. Now, if they'd have come back when we first reopened, I think they'd have been fine. But the reality is obviously a lot of the people haven't come back yet. So when they do come back, what is it they're going to be expecting, and are we going to tick that box? So I think that's key. It's a key thing we need to talk about today. So,
and one of the things we were talking about, I remember at the time, is day one when you reopened after the first ever lockdown, everywhere should have been very good. But the point is that could have been day one for 10% of your members or 30% of your members that came back on that day. But what about 3 days' time? Because that was still the first day back for someone else. So it's all about this first impression, isn't it?
Yeah, totally not.
Yeah. So if that's the context of where we are in terms of problems, let's think about some solutions then. So clearly, what we're not going to be talking to you about today is marketing and getting people through the door. So we're not going to give you any special tips or tricks to improve the number of prospective customers that might come through the door to consider being members in January. What we're going to assume is that there'll be a certain number of people coming through the door, because there always is at that time of year, and hopefully it'll be the same this year as others. January, February, I think you said before, Craig, it's normally about 40% of a
40% of the year's income will probably come in during those 2 months. So if you're going to be right, there's probably 2 stages of the year that you definitely need to be right. It's the January, February, and the September, October. Obviously, for the university, it's the September, which is the peak. But in general, for the others, a huge amount of the make or break of next year's budget is based on what we do during January and February. Because I'm assuming your budgets are already set. If we don't hit certain numbers, then as of April, you're going to be down before you've even started. So we've got to use these next couple of months to basically drive us back up to the levels that are going to hit our budget target ready for next year.
Yeah, definitely. So this is all about what we're going to tell you now is all about. We're going to get 100 people through the door or 200 people through the door or whatever that number of people is through the door. Let's increase our chances of closing those people so we have a higher percentage close rate. And what we've seen through doing this process in the past is that it absolutely will improve the feedback, the closing, the referrals, the customer experience scores, and all of that good stuff. Why don't you talk us through it, Craig?
Yeah, okay. So again, what's a key factor in sort of leisure sales is I also had the pleasure of being the national sales manager for LA Fitness as well at the time, and we used to look into things in a lot of detail. And normally it's around between 80 and 84% of our memberships come through word of mouth. Now, that's only going to work if we're doing things right. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to jump across into a different bit of software, and I'm going to start explaining a thing that I've been using for years, but more so recently due to all this COVID stuff. It's a thing that I was taught in McDonald's, and it was called fussy customer walks. Now, I was at an organization the other week, and they said that had a negative connotation. So for them, I changed it to the Queen's visit. If the Queen was going to come into your organization as of tomorrow, what would need to be done? Okay, so there's a load of different bits we're going to go through. I'm going to go through some of these quite fast. You know, I'm going to talk for probably about 25, 30 minutes. If there's any questions, please put them into the chat. I'm sure.
I'll be monitoring the chat, Craig.
You can either answer the chat or tell me there's a question, and by all means, I'll answer anything that you need to. So people are going to start coming in. One of the first things we need to look at is how they make contact in the first place. So in terms of this little guide, so the red flags is what's expected. The tasks or actions are the yellow ones, or things that you should probably be looking to do before we get into the new year. Training required. Again, these are the types of things you'll need to train in, and anything in green is how you should be measuring these things going forward. But with a website, it should be easy and obvious. Years and years ago, you will have been trained that never to give out any prices over the phone or online. Well, that's changed. You know, please don't not give them the information that they need now, because a lot of the inquiries that people will do will be online. So make sure that I went to a site the other week, and in order to find the prices, it took me 23 clicks, and you had to really know where you were going to try and get there. So what I'd be saying now is, if you go into any of the private sector, what they'll be finding is it's instantly there. This is the price. It'll have a range from this to this. Get your information, make it as obvious and easy for them to be able to get the information. Now, the second bit on here is this contact us section, or is it an inquiry section? I keep going onto websites, and on the website, there's a contact us, but the contact us is normally when you've had an issue or a problem. Now, are you making it easy for people to inquire and to give you their details? So again, should be something we do. And what you offer, is that available on the website, or, you know, is it just a class timetable? Is it going through all the different swim clubs you have? Is it going through I went to an organization the other week, they had 19 different types of birthday parties, etc., etc. So is it really telling us what we offer, or is it just the old school gym swimming classes? A majority of you lot offer so much that, you know, we've got to make sure we get that across. So in terms of this, I normally do, what do we offer? I do this thing via a thing called a product map. And again, measure, go onto your website and try and inquire, see how long it takes for someone to go back, do a little tiny bit of a feedback on yourselves. So in general, are we making it as easy as possible on the website? Because that's where they're probably going to look first. Social media, again, you just basically match what we've just done there, do exactly the same again. That information should be available for them. In terms of the telephone, so again, you know, this is about how do you capture your data? Where does this data go when they ring? And are we getting names and numbers? I work with a company called Pro Insight. Pro Insight reckon that we only capture data for around about 52% of the people who inquire, which means that there's 48% of people that we can't chase up and we can't do anything with. So if you're going to train your staff in anything at this time of the year, it's please take their data.
A lot of people that I've been speaking to, you know, still, even nowadays, are saying that we're struggling to even answer every call as well. So if you don't answer, you definitely can't get any data.
Yeah, and again, there's other organisations. I work with an organisation called Moneypenny, who will do a free report on any of your organisations on finding out how many phone calls you're missing and all that type of stuff. It's well worth looking into before you go in. Obviously, how quick do we answer the phone? And in terms of your way of answering. Now, when I go to organizations, I asked this question in an organization the other week. It was, how many outgoing calls have you been trained in, and how many ingoing calls have you been trained in? And the answer was, we've been trained how to answer the phone in most of those organizations. So, you know, for these different types of calls, it's about making sure we've got the best people available to try and answer them where possible. So the idea behind it, yeah, please make sure that you've trained your staff in the different types of calls that you're likely to get, and make sure we handle them in the correct way where possible. I use things called observational checklists to manage my staff. Just really, really simple tools to make sure they're doing the things that they need. So it's the answering techniques, it's the product knowledge they're going to need, and making sure they get the data capture, absolutely key. And of course, the way you're going to measure this would either be by mystery shops yourself or by an external company, and looking at the number of drop calls that you get. You know, how many calls ring out for more than a minute? I don't know about you, but when it gets to about 30 seconds, it feels like an age when you're on that phone. So the idea behind it, yeah, just please make sure that this is how they're going to try and contact us. Please make sure that we're aware of it and we're doing something with it. Now, once they've done that, they've got to get here. So when they ask your staff, you know, is the address available? I do a lot of audits on organizations, and one of the things I tend to find is that postcodes don't always get you to the organization. I came from an organization yesterday, and the postcode takes me 500 meters to a golf club down the road. And I asked reception, has anyone ever called and said they were lost? And he said, yeah, all the time. And I was like, so you know that information, you've done nothing with it. Mental, doesn't make sense. Now, if they'd have said, here's the postcode, and we are 500 yards down the road, or we're by this building, or we're by some sort of landmark that they might realize, that may help. I'll take that a little bit further in a minute. Are your staff aware of the bus routes available and how they can get in? And can they give directions from probably 2 or 3 different directions, depending on where people are coming from? Again, it's just a key bit of information we need to train our staff on understanding locations and how to get there. Now, there's a new product called What 3 Words. I don't know if anyone uses it for their organization, but whereas the postcode will take you to a general area, What 3 Words will take you to within a car parking space. So I think it's 3 meters by 3 meters. So your front door will have an exact space, and it will take every single person to that exact space. It really, really makes sense that we start using this now. And this has been a tool that's been used by the fire, the police, the ambulance services, because they can't afford to have the problems that we have when we direct someone just with a postcode. So again, every single space on the whole of the planet has been given 3 words, and you put these 3 words in, and it takes you directly to the location. Please, please, please make sure that you try and use something like that going forward. Really easy to add to your website, and just makes sense because it'll get people and stop any extra phone calls going to reception that we don't need. In terms of opening times, this is crazy, but quite often I go to organizations and the opening times are inside the organization and not outside. So if I turn up to your organization and I don't know when you're open, I've got to wait till you're open to find out when you're open, which doesn't really make sense. Now, we often don't see this because we know when we're open because we work there. So we don't notice these type of things. But when we look at things, this fussy customer walk or Queen's visit is always trying to look from the customer's perspective. So hopefully that makes a little bit more sense. Now, in terms of approaching the venue, so again, directions, are there any brown signs? Do I know where I am? Are they correct? Are they taking me there? Again, clean and clear. So how does the place look? So once they get in, are the marketing messages going to bring the best return? Are they bringing people in? Are you doing fussy customer walks to make sure there's no litter, the bins overflow, and there's no dirty bins? It's just a bugbear of mine, but because it's a bin, it doesn't mean it has to be dirty. So again, how do you audit yourself, and how do you make sure that anyone that walks in today, you're giving yourself the best opportunity? Things like gardening. I went to a site the other week, and there were some weeds up to my hip, and apparently they'd only come that week. Because the lad, I said, you've got some weeds in. He went, oh yeah, we did them last week. And I was like, oh my God, it's like Jack and the Beanstalk weeds. The reality is they didn't have a gardening schedule.
Particularly in November.
Yeah, it's just meant, it just happens all the time. But, we get used to walking past it. When you've walked into if you work in an organization, you probably walk in and out maybe up to 1,000 times a year. Well, that is totally different. The first impression is that first time when you walk in and you start to see these things.
I think that's the key. That's the key point around this whole philosophy, Craig, isn't it? That, what I see a lot of is, I don't see a lot of managers of facilities or recreational assistants or lifeguards or whatever who want it to not be pristine and want it to not, they want it to be clean, they want it to be up to scratch. But because you're seeing it every day, you don't necessarily notice it, and you're kind of used to how it looks. And it's about trying to look at it with a fresh perspective.
Yeah, we just become blind. That's the problem. I remember when I first moved into the house that I'm in now, and I remember me and my wife walked around it, and as we were viewing it, it was like, right, that bathroom's got to change, this has got to change, that's got to change. And then when you move in, you prioritize, you do the children's bedrooms first, and the bathroom that needed to be changed, I'm 3 years in and it looks okay now. We are still going to do it, but we just haven't quite got round to it. But anyone else's first impression will probably be like mine. It's a 1970s bathroom suite and it's pink. So, but as these things start to grow on you, the more and more you see them, these customers don't want that as their first impression. And again, training people not to walk. People always say to me, what's the difference between the good organizations and the bad organizations? And I went to do some interview. There's a company called Life Leisure. They win a lot of the UK Active Awards. I had a meeting with the chief exec. I had a meeting at 9:30. I got there for 9 o'clock. He comes through the car park and I could see the staff going, oh my God, he's picking loads of stuff up. As he walked in, he had like 6 bags of crisps, 4 bottles, a few plastic bags that were blowing around the place. The receptionist was like, can I have them? Can I take them off you, Malcolm? And he was like, just don't walk past them again, please. And it's that type of thing where it becomes the difference. So, understanding these things and not walking past them, absolutely key. Again, car park, the signage, what does it look like? Does it do its job? Is it litter free? Is the lighting all working? Again, is there a gardening plan? Etc., etc. Now we start really creating the first impression. That will obviously influence it, but now they're starting to come in. So again, is it litter free? Spiders web. Spiders they're a pain in the bum, spiders, because they always come back and they always go in corners, right? So I don't think I've been to many leisure centres where they don't have spiders webs above as you walk in. What does it smell like? What's the smell like? Are the light, if there's bulbs there, are they lit? Are they working? Is there a map of the building so they know where to go rather than feeling like, oh my God, I'm not sure where to walk or where the changing rooms are, etc., etc. So again, do we do these walks daily? Do we make sure we find all these different things? And again, are you auditing yourself for those areas? Now, reception desk. So, how are they, are they up to date? Are they, we things like, how do you use a diary in your organization? Would I, as a member of staff, would I be trained on how to communicate properly? Because I keep going to organizations where the communication maybe isn't as good as it could be. We use this thing called a huddle or a stand-up meeting where someone from each department comes and tells everyone that they know what's going on in their department that day. And obviously little product knowledge quizzes to keep people, keep their knowledge up to date on what you're doing, especially at different times of year. The aesthetics. So what does a good desk look like? Well, sometimes a desk in a leisure centre doesn't look like the desk in a hotel. Desks in hotels will look normally perfect, especially if you go to the likes of your Hiltons, your village hotels, these type of things. What does behind a desk? Is it okay to have a coffee cup and coats and bags? Is that okay? Sometimes in leisure, it seems like it's okay. I don't think it should be, but that people have got used to it, and that's okay. Again, the queuing system. It's amazing, right? If you walked into a post office or a bank 15 years ago, you will have been faced with a queue. Right now, if you walk into a post office or a bank, you'll probably have someone in concierge trying to direct you to different areas of the bank to make sure there's no queue. 15 years ago, if you walk into a leisure centre, there'd probably be a queue. You walk in now and there still is a queue. So what I'd be saying is what are your trigger? How many people need to be in a queue before a duty manager will step in and help the receptionist, or before a manager will get involved in trying to help and ask people questions? So the idea behind it, these things really, really important. In terms of staff, so again, what are the uniform standards? What would be seen as hygienic and non-hygienic? How often do you wipe your touch areas, etc., etc.? And to me, things like body language and how they stand and what they look and what they do, all key. I would be training people for, some organizations don't like to call it sales. Any organization I've been in is one of those, because I don't think we should have a sales job. I think we should have people who are willing to help people. So when someone comes into your organization, you're going to help them to live longer, and it's our job to try and get them to make sure that our facility is the one they need to do that in. Now, in terms of pitches, I'm just going to jump across. And obviously we're just going to look at some standards, but if you can just talk, Christian, through, this is just two things that you see quite a lot.
Yeah, so all these pictures that Craig's got here are ones that I've taken personally in the last 6 months. So they're not, from the archives or anything like that. Just a couple of things that I see quite frequently. These wood effect floors are quite popular, quite on trend, but they typically have this kind of texture to them. And if they're not cleaned very well, if they're just mopped, you get all this ingrained dirt, which you can see. You shouldn't be able to see the grain of these floors. If you can start to see the grain, then they're dirty. And then another thing on the right-hand side, this is an example of just on that left of that picture, you can see where we've had a social distancing sign on the floor. You see the circle, semicircle. I should have taken it slap bang in the middle, but there's so many examples of this where we're putting down these distancing signs, we're picking them up again, and then it's showing either it's by removing them, it's showing like how clean the floor is underneath, or sometimes we're leaving like residues and sticky horribleness kind of behind. And then also on that, there's a footprint on that tile there, and that's stuff like that is, I would say, kind of inexcusable. We shouldn't be having exhibits of footprints and social distancing signs left on the floor.
Yeah, and again, it's one of those things, isn't it? It's the customer's not going to expect that. That's the key driver behind all this. Is if we're clean, like we're saying we were, remember when we wanted to reopen again, it was like, we're going to be clean, we've got these standards, we do this. Well, that's fine if you did them, but we've got to keep doing them, and that's part of what it is. So again, that's a reception area, that's absolutely fine. Changing rooms, these are what do I always see in these? I don't think that people pick up the drains very often and flush them out underneath. Quite often they're full of sand, dirt, slime, smells, all the different pieces that come with it. Chewies on the back of doors, all these different things. I went into one the other week, and a young child had been a very good artist. They'd done like I don't know how to explain the shape and still keep it the right thing to mention, but it had like a funny shape with some stuff coming out of it on the back of the door. And I was trying to say to the staff, have you seen this? And they were like, no. And I was like, well, it's in the family changing room. Maybe a 2 foot phallic symbol is not what the kids really need to see. So the idea behind it is when you're getting in the changing rooms, you've got to look at it again from a customer's perspective, because when they close that door, that's when they see the chewy, or they see the penis drawn on the door, or they see the dirt stuck in behind the legs. Now, again, in terms of changing rooms, this is all post-COVID. Now, you may say that your organization isn't like this, but I'm not saying it is, and hopefully it's not. But this isn't a one-off for me and Christian. I've been in in the last 3 weeks, I've been in 5 different sites, and these are things that I'm seeing in every site. So it's not just a case for the photograph so we can show you everything's bad, but this is the reality of what we're seeing.
Yeah, and it's things like the rust marks from the poles and the white sort of calcium staining, and people, I think, perhaps if you're an operator, you think again it's always been like that, or that's hard to get rid of, and people understand that. But actually, it's about looking at it from the customer's perspective. Well, if you're walking in and seeing that, what are you thinking? You're thinking it's not very clean.
Well, and do you know what? It makes me sort of laugh a little bit, because I don't know if any of you lot have got a jet wash at home. I always ask people, how often do you jet wash your back garden or your front path or whatever? And they'll normally say a couple of times a year. I'll then go to the leisure centre and say, how often do you jet wash outside the front? And they'll go, oh, no, we don't really do that. And it's like, okay, so we have different standards at home than we have in work, but but people have to pay for this standard. And it's like, I don't pay at home, but I still want it to be good, and I still want it to be comfortable for us. And you're right, the likes of these sorts of calcification, or this takes years to get this bad.
Yeah.
But it's a bit like when someone ends up overweight. It doesn't happen overnight. It's not like, oh my God, I just put 4 stone on it. It's a gradual process. And our job is to make sure that we nip it in the bud at the beginning. So understanding exactly what these things should look like is absolutely key. So, okay, that's changing rooms. Let me close that one down. So now we're going to go into sort of like classes. So what do we see? Now, again, within a fussy customer walk, you've got to put yourself in their shoes. Now, customers lie down because they look up and do abs classes. So I was in a class the other week. I was in an organization. We lay down, we looked up, and they were like, oh my God, can you see that? And I was like, yeah, I can. I could see the spider's webs. I could see the Do you know, they used to have a fan, or they had fans in there ready from the summer, and fans are an absolute nightmare for catching dirt and dust.
Yeah.
Water fountains. I met a gentleman years ago who nicknamed them phlegm fountains, because every time he went to them, there was like probably like an oyster in them, but it was like it was like people don't just use them to drink out of. So we've got to keep these things, you know, this was prior to COVID, we needed to keep these things clean, but now it's even more important. Now I know I've gone to some organizations which have gone, let's close it because of COVID, let's just close it. Doesn't solve the issue. It's still dirty. It's still got watermarks on it, etc., etc. You know, the mats, the equipment, the blue towels or blue roll. I know that you're probably not allowing them to use their own towels to wipe things down. You know, they never used to wipe things down as well as they should with their own towels. So are they doing it any better now, or are you doing it all for them? If anyone's got laminated flooring, you'll probably be aware that it's a nightmare. You know, you open the door, there's like a little swirling bit of dust flying around somewhere. Well, try that when you've had 600 people coming in through a day. You know, so these class floors, they get really, really dirty. If I'm going to be lying down in a yoga class for an hour, I'm probably going to see it. And
it's a good point, Craig, you made about that just there, and also the fact that we have different standards at home and at work, because what works at home as well, we expect more at home, but what works at home, if we've got a laminate floor, is we can mop it because we've got 4 or 5 people walking over it a day. Whereas when you've got 600 people going across it in a day, you can't just mop it and expect it to be thoroughly clean, you know. So you've got to match what the challenges to how you're trying to deal with them.
You know what? There'll be one of the things I always ask organisations when I first go and do troubleshooting is this. I always say to the staff, which is the best toilet to go to? And they always go, right, don't go to this one because it's minging. But if you go around the back, there's a disabled one and you can go in there. And it's like brilliant. So the one the customers go is rotten, and the one that you lot go in is okay. That doesn't sit very well with me. Okay. So the idea behind it, you know, this happened when we've got the flow of traffic that we've got to make sure that our end of day cleans or our start of day cleans are absolutely giving us the best opportunity possible. And again, if I was going to be clean at one time in the day, would it be at 5 o'clock in the evening when I'm about to get my most members in, or would it be 6 o'clock in the morning when I've hardly got anyone in? I'd go for 5 o'clock every day of the week. But you know what? In reality, we have to do it all day. But if I was only going to be ready once, it would be before my peak time and not before the time when hardly anyone's in. Because by the time we get to 12 o'clock, it's normally dirty. And then from then on inwards, we're not really setting the best standard that we could. So that's classes. Again, going over to swim, really big area for us, the wet floor areas, overflow dirt into the pool. I call it toe jam, the little black bits, pieces that come off, like we were seeing before, the calcium or the hard water. Now, you get calcium buildup when you've got in the hard water area, right? So it starts to deposit itself on things. You'll see it around the metal pipes. You'll see it in the pool tiles, these different areas. And if it's a soft water area, you'll start getting loose tiles and things going missing. Now, again, a few more pictures for you, the things that we're constantly seeing. So again, this is poolside.
Yeah. And again, it's all like stuff that we see all the time, but it's kind of people just get used to it because a lot of this stuff is things that they don't just happen overnight. It's not like if someone's sick, you clean it up because it's new and it's surprising and you weren't expecting it, and so you deal with it. Whereas this is just a build up, a gradual build up, years, you know, days, weeks, months, years. But any of this stuff is a sign that, you know, it's going to be a red flag to customers.
What amazes me is this. When I was in McDonald's, I remember some fella said to me, can you brush the floor? I started doing it and he went, no one's ever shown you how to brush the floor. And I was like, if I'm being honest, I was 16. My mum used to do everything for me. I'd never done any cleaning, right? And the training was, here's a brush. Now this fella taught me how to brush a floor properly, move things out, get underneath, make sure you do this. And they trained me. So I could now brush a floor. They did exactly the same when I was mopping. But we tend to make this assumption that these kids or these people are going to be able to do these jobs and to a standard that's okay for industrial. You know, some of these kids can't even clean the bedroom, right? And we've got them cleaning leisure centres. I'm not saying it's always kids. It might be, you know, you might have proper dedicated cleaners or a cleaning company. But the reality is that, you know, we've got to do things properly. If not, it's going to come back and bite us. You know, that's a key thing that's going to happen. So, okay, let me move on a little bit. Now, again, in terms of the changing rooms floors, again, slippy, corners, cubicles, bases of legs, litter, gum. Again, these are all things that we just see all the time. Okay, so again, in the change, you'll see in here, it's round these areas. It's as you start. I went to a site the other day and I could tell they had one of those machines because it couldn't get into corners.
Yeah.
And I was like, so you just use the machine and just leave the rest, yeah?
It's around the bottom of cubicles as well is always a big one,
it's a
isn't it?
nightmare. You know, you can see it here around here,
Yeah.
but it's the same thing around the bottom of every single cubicle. Anywhere where there's a bin, where there's a thing, or where it kicks in, it just makes, you know, that's what we see. You know, again, in here, it's the same bits, it's the same pieces all the time. And I think, you know, one of the reasons why we wanted to do this is, you know, we're about to go into our busiest period. Even if we only get it once right a year, once a year, it's got to be in this coming months.
Yeah.
It's got to be in January. So the idea behind it, again, spectators area, glass, dirty, gum under seats. I was in a site the other week, I was in the cafe, and I said to the staff, just do me a favour, just put your hands round and rub round underneath the table. And they all went, oh God, I'm not doing that. And I went, why?
Yeah.
Your customers pay to come in here. And they were like, well, no, it'll be full of chew. And I was like, well, let's get rid of the chewy then. Let's make sure it's clean. It makes more sense. That's what we've got to do. Again, gym, kit, under the kit, water fountains, corners, ceilings, touch points, etc.
What I would say, Craig, is from what I've seen, you know, gyms are one of the areas that we are continuing to do a good job on. But there's still always room for improvement, as you say. I think the equipment and stuff, you know, we're doing a good job on that. But what we're doing, we're focusing a lot on these touch points, the COVID related stuff, and we're neglecting some of the other basics.
Yeah. What you're dead right is someone's just pressed this bit, so they wipe the handle. Right, brilliant. Someone's touched the bit where you change the weight, let's wipe that bit. But all the weight stack's dirty, right? Or the actual bit where you sweat on when you're on a bike. Now, this is the other thing about a fussy customer's walk is a customer will sit on a bike for 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Well, what do you think they look at? They look at everything. We walk in and go, is everything okay? And then we walk off. Yeah, it seemed all right. You know, I remember in McDonald's, this fella saying to me, can you do me a favor? Can you go and check if the toilet's okay? I walked in. I walked out, he went, is it okay? And I went, yeah, it's all right. He went, is it? I walked in and he said, will you rub this? So next to where the urinal was, he said, would you touch this wall here? And I went, no. And he went, why? You said it was okay. Yeah. And then he started explaining to me, he said, can you see the way the grout's a slightly different colour there? That's because the wee splashes on it. It's not okay. The wee runs down this bit at the front and it goes on this bit. And this is, and in the next minute, it was like, oh my God, he basically trained me indirectly by making me realise that I didn't have a clue what I was talking about. Yeah, and I'm not sure. I'm a training company. That's what I do. So when I go into organisations, I'm not always convinced that some of these people have actually been trained. I think it's a bit like when you get a gym member of staff. If they got an MVQ level 2 or 3, we assume that they're going to be a good instructor because they've now got this qualification. When the proof is in the pudding and the actions that they actually do, not the qualification that they got. You know, so. You know, we can go into all these areas, the cafes, the sports hall, you know, all these different bits and pieces. But, you know, do we really get into that detail? You know, every site I've ever been in, we do a fussy customer walk every single day. Someone rang me up from one of my customers and said, Craig, we're struggling to do them every day. He said, so we're just doing them once a week. And I went, okay, so every week you find a load of problems. They went, yeah. I said, well, so will customers then. And the whole idea is that, you know, the McDonald's thing is if I found 100 problems today, there's a high likelihood that I could probably get rid of about 80 of them now. I could get rid of the chewy, I could wipe the windows, I could get rid of the blue tack on the wall, I could wipe the legs of the table, right? So that's 80 things that a customer doesn't need to see. And that's what I think good customer service is preventing them from seeing things that we know are going to cause them problems. Now, obviously, in terms of this, there's the sign-up process and how we deal with that. You know, you've got to make sure that you capture the data, that you do a proper needs analysis and that you tour them properly. So I agree all these things have got to happen, but their mind will be made up based on all this other stuff we've just done. So you can have the best sales process in the world. And I see this all the time. I call it running a bath with the plug out. Is where people just concentrate on turning the tap on and getting people through the door, but they don't concentrate on keeping older people and making sure that we're providing a proper service for them in the first place. So the idea behind it totally and utterly makes sense that we concentrate on their first impression because it will last and it will, you know, it will have a massive impact on whether they join your organization or not. Again, you can have all the exit questionnaires in the world. and all the ex-member campaign and all these different things when people leave. But the reality is, if you want to drive your business during January and February, you have to get this bit right. This has so much impact on your organization, and it's also the quickest free win. Now, we totally understand, right? You know, this isn't a sales pitch. Christian's not trying to sell the fact that he can come in and make your site gleaming. I'm not trying to sell the fact that we've got a product that would help make sure all these things are happening. It's not about that, right? The key is that if any of you are interested, we will send you a full list of everything that I've just talked through. I'll put this into an Excel document for you. You can then use this as a bit of a training document for your teams if you want. You know, if you've already got one and you want to send us one across and it's better than this, then we'll use that. We'll forward that on to other people if you want. But the key is that the first impression really, really matters. And I was in an organization yesterday. We did a fussy customer walk in the morning. By lunchtime, the organization was already better. That's how quick this can make an impact.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to jump back onto the slides for Christian to talk through. Over to you, Chris. Over to you, mate.
No worries, Craig. We'll start wrapping up, guys. We're drawing things to a close now. That's the main bits of information. But I guess what I'd like to just add is why is this important? We've talked about it from your perspective, and as Craig said, we're not here trying to sell anything here. We're just trying to help because we're not expecting to be able to generate any revenue from you, even if we wanted to before January. This is all about what you guys can do now in the next couple of weeks to make a big difference. And the point is about this, that straight away, you can get an immediate impact, as Craig said, from this. So straight away, you'll have happier members tomorrow, and those members can be referring people and getting more people through the door in January that might well join. In January, in the medium term, it's about improving your close rate. And then, as Craig said at the outset, the longer term of this is trying to be in a strong position from a budgetary perspective, improving your customer experience and getting more referrals, because referrals are key in this business.
Yeah, well, if 84% of our business is going to come through word of mouth, it makes sense that we concentrate on them giving us good word of mouth, because it can also go the other way. Yeah. As someone who does sales training, I quite often say to people, I've knocked back organizations because I think that they need to fix the product first before they start selling, because it's that running the bath of the plug out. There's only so many times we can turn that tap on. Yep. So it makes sense to have it right before you turn it on. Put the plug in, make sure everything's okay, make sure the bath's clean, because you don't want to waste the water. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and also if you think about what often happens in January, it's like discount time to try and get more sales. Well, if you're discounting, somebody might walk in and think, well, yeah, if it's half price, I could probably put up with it being a bit grubby. But as soon as you switch on, it's back up to full price again. They're not going to be happy. So why not try and get the basics right and sell at full price rather than having to discount?
Okay, there's a really good question in there, which I'll come back to in a minute. So, yeah, the idea behind it, yeah, that's fine. In terms of next steps, so I've just dropped I think I have anyway. Yeah. I think I've just dropped my email. I've dropped my email into the chat. So it's craig@opspal.com. By all means, just if you want to ask me any questions, exactly the same with Christian. If you've got any queries or questions, please file them to us. We're going to, anyone who's interested, we'll send you a link so you can download an Excel version of the presentation that I've just gone through. Please, we want to help. I think we definitely proved this during the COVID time that we weren't trying to sell to people then, and we're still not now. Is that we've got all this experience and we keep seeing the same things wherever we go. So we want our industry to be the one that's the best and that stands out, etc. You've probably noticed that supermarkets aren't quite as good now as when COVID first started. You've probably noticed that cafes and restaurants aren't quite as good now as when they first started. So we're exactly the same, but we can't afford to be going into our peak time of year. It really doesn't make any sense.
No, it's about just trying to give people the perspective, isn't it, Craig? Just to say, again, not to accept the way it is because it's always been that way, or because it's looked that way for a while and we're used to it now. It's actually just saying, well, if there's one aha moment, it's take a step back and look at it with a fresh pair of eyes from the customer's perspective and see if your standards are living up to what you would want them to be, what you're putting your name to it at the end of the day.
Totally. And I think as well, get different people to do different walks, and because different people see different things. So I do a lot of disc profiling. Yeah, people who are a high C or very conscientious, they'll get right into the detail, whereas other people will look for sales. But it's the more different people you can get looking at your standards, the better your standards will become. So I think that's a key driver. Now, there's a really key question here that someone just put into the chat, which is from Camille, is we're going back to basics and believe in the case of starting with trainers, management who provide the staff inductions. You're dead right. You know, I'll just show you something very, very quick, but within our particular, this thing that we do is in here, you know, how do you clean a men's toilet? What does it look like? And, you know, what detail do you go into? How do I set up a trampoline? What does that look like? Well, it should be a video. Now, in this day and age, most of your training is done the old way. You know, it doesn't really make sense because everything's still done on paper. Whereas, you know, if I want to know how to clean a toilet, I should take a video of it and say, right, you start at the top. Here's all the kit I need. Here's what we do. So training now should be virtual. Most of these young kids coming through the ranks, they don't read manuals anymore. They go onto YouTube and find out how to do things. And we need to catch up and we need to get to that level. So your training standards should be based around videos and not just this literature of 5,000 words that they've got to try and pluck out and make sense of. So, you know, in terms of going forward, yeah, you know, again, if there's any more questions, please just, you know, tell us what you want and we're happy to help you with it in any way, shape or form that we can.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know if anybody else has got any questions or comments now. If you feel free to unmute yourself. As I say, we'll be circulating the resources and a copy of the webinar as well.
No questions. That could be a good or a bad thing, but not a problem. Yeah, so going forward, if you have any queries, Christian's put his details in there. It's charris@slipsafety.co.uk. Mine is craig@opspal.com. If you want to ask us any questions, please feel free to do so. We're more than happy to help. And by all, yes, we'll send you a copy of this plan and these bits and pieces across to you.
Perfect. All right, Craig. Well, look, I think we've managed to answer everyone's questions, fingers crossed. So thank you very much for that. And thanks everybody for joining us. Really appreciate it. And we'll wrap it up and say thank you and see you soon.
Thank you.